The desert wind carried nothing but dust and death across the red rocks of the Western Territories in the summer of 1870. Above the scorched earth, buzzards circled lazily against a gray sky, their black wings cutting through the oppressive heat that shimmered off the canyon walls. This was no place for the living, yet here, among the scattered bones and withered sagebrush, lay proof that cruelty knew no boundaries. She couldn't have been more than 18, this girl whose pale skin had turned angry red under the merciless sun. Her dress, once perhaps blue or green, hung in tatters around her thin frame, the fabric torn and stained with dirt and blood. Raw leather strips bound her wrists so tightly that her fingers had turned purple, and her ankles bore similar restraints. But it was the wooden sign hanging from her neck that spoke of a hatred deeper than the canyons themselves. Crude letters burned into rough pine spelling out Indian land. Her lips, cracked and bleeding, moved soundlessly in what might have been prayer or delirium. How long had she been here? Hours? Days? Time meant nothing in this furnace of rock and sand where even the lizards sought shade. Her blue eyes, once perhaps bright with youth and hope, stared unfocused at the circling birds above, as if she could will herself to join them in their flight from this earthly torment. Memory came in fragments through the haze of thirst and pain, the wagon train moving slowly across the plains, her father's strong hands on the reins, her mother's gentle humming as she mended clothes by the campfire. Then the night visitors, not Indians as they'd feared, but white men with faces twisted by liquor and hatred. Men who spoke of teaching lessons, of sending messages, of making examples. They'd taken her in the chaos, dragged her away while flames consumed everything she'd ever known. "You love them savages so much," one had spat as they'd burned the sign into wood. "Then you can die on their land." The sound came first as a whisper against stone, the soft fall of moccasined feet on rock. Then a shadow fell across her fevered face, blocking the sun's assault for a blessed moment. Through her delirium, she saw him, a figure that seemed carved from the very landscape itself. Skin burnished copper, long black hair tied back with a strip of leather. The geometric patterns tattooed across his chest marked him as Comanche, a warrior of the southern plains. Taza had been tracking elk for 2 days when he'd spotted the buzzards. At 30 winters, he knew the difference between birds circling dead prey and those waiting for death to come. Curiosity and caution warred within him as he approached, every sense alert for ambush. The white soldiers had been known to use bait before, though never quite like this. He studied the scene from behind a boulder, reading the signs in the disturbed earth. Boot prints, not moccasins. Horses shod with iron, not unshod Indian ponies. The girl's placement was deliberate, far enough from any trail that she wouldn't be found quickly, but close enough to the old Comanche hunting grounds that the message would be clear. This was white man's cruelty wearing Indian clothes. The warrior's jaw tightened as he read the sign around her neck. He'd seen such hatred before, felt it in the bullets that had torn through his village 5 winters past. His wife, his small son, his elderly parents, all gone in smoke and screams while he'd been hunting, returning only to ashes and silence. Since then, he'd walked alone, neither fully in the world of the living nor willing to join the dead. Still, leaving her here would make him no better than those who'd done this. With fluid grace, he descended from his hiding place, moving carefully to avoid startling her into crying out. Up close, he could see the fever in her eyes, the dangerous dryness of her skin. Another day, perhaps less, and the desert would claim her. His knife, sharp as winter wind, sliced through the leather bonds. Her arms fell limply to her sides, circulation slowly returning in painful tingles she was too far gone to feel. The sign he removed more carefully, studying the crude workmanship with disgust before tossing it aside. From his water pouch, made from the stomach of an antelope, he dribbled precious liquid between her cracked lips. The water brought her back from the edge of darkness. Her eyes focused slowly on the face above her. Sharp cheekbones, eyes dark as obsidian, the unmistakable features of the people she'd been taught to fear. Terror and confusion warred in her expression as she tried to speak. Why, The word came as barely a whisper. Her throat too damaged for more. Her trembling hand gestured weakly toward the discarded sign. Why did they leave me with this sign? Indian land. Taza didn't answer immediately. How could he explain to this barely living girl the depths of hatred that existed between their peoples? How could he tell her that she'd been made into a message, a warning, a cruel joke by men who saw both her and his people as less than human? Instead, he lifted her gently, surprised by how little she weighed, and began the journey to shelter. The cave he'd been using as a hunting camp lay hidden in a narrow canyon where water seeped from the rock even in the driest seasons. He'd laid in supplies for several days of hunting: dried meat, wild tubers, healing herbs his grandmother had taught him to recognize. It would serve to keep them both alive while he decided what to do with this unexpected burden. She drifted in and out of consciousness as he carried her, occasionally mumbling words in English he didn't fully understand. Names, perhaps. Papa, Mama, James. The last came with tears that her dehydrated body could barely produce. He'd learned enough English from the trading posts to know she called for family, but whether they lived or died, he couldn't know. As the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, painting the rocks in shades of blood and gold, Taza reached his sanctuary. The cave was cool and dark, a blessed relief from the day's heat. He laid the girl on a bed of pine boughs covered with a buffalo hide, then set about the work of keeping her alive. Water first. Always water in this dry land. Then the healing plants. Willow bark for fever. Crushed sage for her wounds. Bare root for strength. He worked with the practiced efficiency of one who'd tended battle wounds before, though never on one of the white people. Her skin, where it wasn't burned by sun, was pale as winter snow, marked here and there with tiny brown spots he'd never seen before. Night brought cool air and the distant howl of wolves. The girl stirred, her eyes opening to find him tending a small fire that threw dancing shadows on the cave walls. Fear flickered across her features again, but exhaustion and pain kept her from fleeing. "Water," she managed to whisper. He brought the pouch to her lips again, supporting her head as she drank. This time she managed several swallows before coughing. When she'd settled back, she studied him with eyes that held intelligence despite her condition. "You saved me." Wonder colored her voice. "But they all said Indians were—" She trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish. Taza understood enough. He'd heard what the whites said of his people in the trading posts, seen it written in their eyes when they looked at him. Savage, animal, less than human. Just as they'd reduced this girl to nothing more than a sign, a message written in suffering. "Rest," he said in his limited English, the word rough on his tongue. "Safe here." She nodded slowly. Trust, born of desperation, overcoming a lifetime of taught fear. As her eyes closed again, she whispered something that might have been thank you or might have been prayer. Taza sat back against the cave wall, watching the fire and the sleeping girl who'd complicated his simple existence. Tomorrow would bring decisions: where to take her, how to return her to her people without getting himself shot, whether she even had people to return to. But tonight, in this small circle of firelight, two souls from different worlds had found an unexpected moment of humanity in a land that seemed determined to strip it from them both. The desert wind continued its lonely song outside, carrying the scent of sage and secrets across the vast darkness of the American frontier. The moon rose full and bright over the canyon walls, casting silver light through the cave entrance where Taza kept his vigil. The girl stirred fitfully in her sleep, her face contorting with dreams that seemed more nightmare than rest. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool night air, and occasionally she would cry out names that echoed off the stone walls. "Papa? James?" And once, clearly, "No, please, no!" Taza refreshed the damp cloth on her forehead, a gesture his mother had done for him countless times in childhood. The geometric tattoos on his chest seemed to shift in the firelight as he moved, each line telling a story of his journey from boy to warrior, from warrior to widower, from man of the tribe to solitary wanderer. He'd thought that part of his life, the caring for another, had been buried with his family. Yet here he was, tending to a white girl who by all rights should fear him more than death itself. When her eyes finally opened, clear for the first time since he'd found her, the moon had traveled halfway across the sky. She blinked slowly, taking in her surroundings with a mixture of confusion and growing awareness. Her gaze settled on him, and he saw her body tense, fingers clutching at the buffalo hide beneath her. "You're still here," she whispered, and he couldn't tell if it was relief or fear that colored her voice. "You sick?" he replied in his halting English. "Need rest? Need water?" She nodded, accepting the water pouch when he offered it. This time she drank deeply, her body recognizing its desperate need. When she finished, she studied him with eyes the color of the morning sky. "My name is Clara," she said softly. "Clara Hawthorne, from Ohio originally, though I suppose—" her voice caught. "I suppose that doesn't matter anymore." Taza understood enough to nod. Names were important, even between enemies. "Taza," he said, touching his chest. Then, because she seemed to expect more, he added, "Means gift." A ghost of a smile crossed her cracked lips. "A gift who saved my life." The smile faded as memory returned. "My family. We were traveling to California. My father had dreams of farmland, a new start after the war. We'd made it so far, almost to Fort Worth, when they came." She didn't need to explain who they were. Taza had seen enough of the border ruffians, the men who used the chaos between Indian and settler to pursue their own cruel ends. They wore no uniform, claimed no allegiance except to violence and profit. "They said we were Indian lovers," Clara continued, her voice stronger now but filled with pain. "Said my father had been trading with the Comanche, selling them guns. It wasn't true. He'd only traded for food when our supplies ran low, fair trades with peaceful bands. But they didn't care about truth." Tears flowed freely now, and Taza didn't stop them. Grief needed its release, like pus from a wound. He'd learned that in his own season of sorrow. "They burned everything, killed my father first, then my mother when she tried to stop them. My brother James, he was only 12. He tried to fight them." Her voice broke entirely then, and for a long moment, only the crackle of the fire and the distant howl of wolves filled the silence. When she spoke again, her voice was hollow. "They kept me alive to send a message. Said if whites wanted to love savages so much, they could die on savage land. They laughed when they burned that sign, laughed as they left me to die." Taza's jaw tightened. He'd seen such cruelty before, though usually it wore a blue uniform. But hatred, he'd learned, came in many colors and spoke many languages. "Your people," Clara said suddenly, looking at him with something like desperation. "Did the soldiers—" "Gone," Taza said simply. 5 winters passed. I hunt, they come." He made a sweeping gesture with his hand. "All gone. Wife, son, all." The silence that fell between them was different now, weighted with shared loss. 2 souls, separated by birth and custom, united by grief. Clara reached out tentatively, her small hand covering his weathered one. He didn't pull away. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." They sat like that as the fire burned lower, finding an unexpected comfort in shared sorrow. Finally, Taza rose to add more wood to the flames. As he did, Clara noticed the way he moved, favoring his left side slightly. "You're hurt," she said. He shrugged. "Old wound. From the day my people died. Let me see." When he hesitated, she added, "Please, you've done so much for me. Let me help if I can." Reluctantly, he turned to show her his back. A long scar ran from his left shoulder blade down to his ribs, clearly from a cavalry saber. Clara gasped softly. "You were there, during the attack." "Hunting. Heard guns. Rode back." His voice was flat, emotionless. "Too late. Soldiers thought all dead. Left me." Clara was quiet for a moment, then said, "The herbs you used on me, "Do you have more?" He gestured to a leather pouch near the cave wall. She struggled to sit up, still weak but determined. With gentle hands, she prepared a poultice from the herbs, mixing them with water as she'd seen her mother do countless times on the trail. When she applied it to the old scar, Taza flinched but didn't move away. "It's still angry," she said softly, meaning the wound. "Some wounds never fully heal, do they?" "No," he agreed, and they both knew they spoke of more than physical scars. As she worked, Clara became aware of how close they were, of the warmth radiating from his skin, of the way the firelight played across the strong planes of his face. She'd been raised to fear Indians, taught that they were brutal and without mercy, yet this man had shown her more kindness than her own kind had. "Why?" she asked suddenly. "Why save me? You could have left me. No one would have known." Taza was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "First time I see white person left to die by white people with Indian words. Makes me think, maybe hatred not about skin, maybe about fear, about making other less than human so easier to hurt." He paused, struggling with the English. "You left with sign make you nothing, but you not nothing. You someone's daughter, like my son was someone's son." Clara's hands stilled on his back. "You see me as human. You are human," he said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. She finished with the poultice and moved back to her place by the fire. The effort had exhausted her, but her eyes remained bright and aware. "What happens tomorrow?" she asked. "I have nowhere to go. No family left, no money, and if those men hear I survived—" "Rest first," Taza said. "Heal. Then we think." "We?" The word held a question and a hope. He met her eyes across the fire. "Not safe alone, for you or me. Men who hurt you still out there. My people scattered, many angry. Would not understand why I help white woman. Both our peoples would call us traitor. Then we're both outcasts," Clara said with a bitter smile. "Nowhere to belong, maybe." Taza said, then, more thoughtfully, "Maybe outcasts find new place, together." The suggestion hung in the air between them, dangerous and full of possibility. Clara knew she should be afraid. Everything she'd been taught said she should fear this man, should try to escape at the first opportunity. But when she looked at him, she saw not a savage, but a fellow soul who understood loss, who'd chosen compassion over hatred. "Together," she repeated softly, testing the word. Outside, a wolf howled again, closer this time. Taza rose and moved to the cave entrance, listening to the night. When he returned, his expression was grave. "Horses," he said. "Far off, but coming. Maybe soldiers, maybe the men who hurt you. We must move soon." Fear flickered in Clara's eyes, but she nodded. "I'll be ready. Rest now," he urged. "Tomorrow, we go deeper into mountains. I know places where neither white nor Comanche go. Safe places." As Clara settled back onto the buffalo hide, exhaustion overtaking her again, she asked, "Taza, do you believe in fate?" He considered the question. "My grandmother say all paths written in stars, but also say we choose which stars to follow." "Then I'm glad," Clara murmured as sleep began to claim her. "Glad my stars led to you." Taza returned to his vigil by the fire, but something had shifted in the cave's atmosphere. Where before there had been two strangers brought together by circumstance, now there was the beginning of something else. Not quite trust, not yet, but a recognition of shared humanity that transcended the barriers their world had built between them. As the night deepened and Clara's breathing evened into true sleep, Taza allowed himself a moment of something he hadn't felt in 5 long winters. Not quite hope, but the possibility of it. Tomorrow would bring danger and hard choices, but tonight, in this small circle of firelight, 2 broken souls had found in each other a reason to keep living. The moon continued its journey across the sky, indifferent to the human drama below, but in that cave hidden in the canyon walls, a new story was beginning to write itself in defiance of all the old hatreds and prejudices that scarred the land like wounds that refused to heal. Dawn broke crimson over the canyon walls. painting the rocks in shades of blood and fire. Taza had been awake for hours, preparing for their journey into the deeper mountains. He'd packed what little they had: dried meat, herbs, water pouches, and the few tools that meant survival in this unforgiving land. Clara woke to find him studying her torn dress with a frown. "Cannot travel like this," he said, gesturing to her tattered clothing. From his pack, he produced a bundle of soft deerskin, a dress and leggings in the style of his people. Was my wife's, kept for memory, but memory not keep you warm." Clara took the garments with trembling hands, understanding the magnitude of what he offered. "I can't take these. They're all you have left of her." "She kind woman," Taza said quietly. "Would want used, not kept for ghosts." While Clara changed behind an outcropping of rock, Taza erased all signs of their presence in the cave. His movements were swift and practiced, a man who'd spent years avoiding pursuit. When Clara emerged, transformed in the practical clothing of the plains, he nodded approval. The dress fit well enough, and the leggings would protect her legs from the harsh brush they'd encounter. "Feels strange," Clara admitted, smoothing the soft leather. "But free somehow, like I'm wearing possibility instead of propriety." They left as the sun cleared the eastern peaks, Taza leading them along paths invisible to untrained eyes. Clara struggled at first, her body still weak from her ordeal, but determination kept her moving. Each time she stumbled, Taza was there, steady and patient, never rushing her despite the urgency she sensed in him. By midday, they'd climbed high into the mountains where the air grew thin and pine trees whispered secrets to the wind. Clara's lungs burned with effort, but she pressed on, driven by the knowledge that stopping might mean death for them both. When Taza finally called a halt beside a narrow stream, she collapsed gratefully on a fallen log. "Drink slow," he cautioned as she reached for the water. "Mountain water cold. Make sick if drink fast." As she followed his advice, Clara studied their surroundings. They were in a different world up here, one of towering pines and scattered boulders, of shadows deep enough to hide in and silence broken only by the occasional cry of an eagle. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "How do you know these paths?" she asked. "Grandfather's grandfather walk here," Taza replied, scanning the ridgeline above them. "Before white men, before horses even, old paths, sacred paths. Some, my people forget, chase buffalo on plains instead. But I remember." They were preparing to continue when the storm struck with the suddenness that only mountain weather could manage. One moment the sky was clear. The next, walls of red dust came rolling down the canyon like a living thing, driven by winds that howled like demons. Taza grabbed Clara's hand, pulling her toward a cluster of rocks that formed a natural shelter. They huddled together as the world disappeared in a whirling chaos of sand and debris. The wind tore at them with angry fingers, seeking to rip them apart. Clara pressed her face against Taza's chest, feeling his arms encircle her protectively. Through the howling storm, she could feel his heart beating steady and strong, an anchor in the chaos. Time lost meaning in the red darkness. It might have been minutes or hours before the wind began to ease. When it finally passed, they emerged coughing and coated in fine dust that turned their skin the color of the earth itself. Clara laughed despite herself, a slightly hysterical sound. "We match now," she said, gesturing at their dust-covered forms. "Neither white nor red, just earth." Taza's rare smile appeared through the dirt. "Maybe that better way. All same underskin anyway." They found shelter in a shallow cave as evening approached, both too exhausted to go further. As Taza built a small fire, Clara used precious water to clean the worst of the dirt from their faces. The simple act of caring for each other had become natural, unconscious. "May I ask you something?" Clara said, as they shared the dried meat that served as dinner. When he nodded, she continued, "Why do you stay alone? Why not join another band of your people?" Taza stared into the fire for a long moment. "After family die, I go north, find other Comanche bands, but I carry darkness inside, anger like poison. Want to hurt whites like they hurt me, almost do terrible things. He paused, struggling with the memory and the language to express it. One night, dream of son, he say, Father, this not the way. Hate make you like them. Wake up and leave. Better alone than become monster. Clara reached out, touching his arm gently. You're not a monster. A monster wouldn't have saved me. Maybe save me too, he said quietly. From becoming what I fear. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell completely. In the distance, they could hear horses picking their way along the lower trails. Too far to be an immediate threat, but close enough to remind them danger still pursued. Taza had chosen their shelter well, invisible from below and accessible only by paths a horse couldn't navigate. Tell me about before, Clara said suddenly. Before the sadness, what was your life like? For the first time since she'd met him, Taza's face softened with something approaching peace. Good life, simple life. Follow buffalo in summer. Shelter in canyons for winter. My wife, Ayana, name means eternal bloom. She laughed like water over stones, always singing. Our son just learning to ride his own pony. 3 summers old, proud like warrior already. He spoke of hunts and ceremonies, of stories told around winter fires, of a world that moved with the rhythms of nature rather than the harsh demands of conquest and settlement. Clara listened with fascination, realizing how little truth had been in the tales she'd heard of Indian life. We had happiness too, she offered when he finished. Different kind, but real. My mother played piano, brought it all the way from Ohio. Evenings she'd play and we'd sing. James loved the funny songs best. He'd dance around making everyone laugh. Her voice caught. I suppose those pianos and songs are scattered across the prairie now, with everything else we were. Not everything, Taza said. You still here. Memory's still here. He touched his chest. Dead, not truly gone while someone remembers. The profound truth of his words struck Clara deeply. In sharing their memories, they'd given their lost loved ones a kind of life again, if only for moments. The thought brought comfort and fresh pain in equal measure. A sound from below made them both freeze. Horses snorting, men's voices carrying on the thin mountain air. Clara couldn't make out words, but the tone was clear, frustrated, angry, searching. Taza moved silently to the cave entrance, every muscle tense. Same men? Clara whispered. He listened intently, then shook his head. Soldiers, cavalry, looking for someone. He glanced back at her. Maybe you, maybe me, maybe both. What do we do? Wait, they cannot climb here in dark. Morning, we go higher, places they cannot follow. Clara moved to sit beside him at the cave mouth, looking down at the flickering torches moving through the trees below. Are you frightened? Fear keep you alive? Taza said, but also must know when fear lie. Those men down there, they should fear us more. They in our land now, mountain land. We know it. They don't. Our land, Clara repeated softly. I like how that sounds. He turned to study her in the dim light. You trust me lead you deeper, further from your world. My world burned on the prairie. Clara said firmly, I have no world now except what we make. Something shifted in Taza's expression, a recognition, perhaps, or a decision made. Then I show you place no white man seen. Sacred place my grandfather show me. Safe place, but hard journey. You strong enough. Clara thought of all she'd survived, all she'd lost, all that might yet be gained. I'm strong enough, she said, and meant it, as if in response to her declaration. The clouds parted to reveal a canopy of stars so vast and bright, it took her breath away. Here, in the high mountains, with no town lights for hundreds of miles, the sky revealed itself in all its ancient glory. There, Taza pointed to a constellation. My people call it First Hunter. Follow him. Always find way home. But where is home now? Clara asked. Taza was quiet for a moment, then said something that would echo in her heart for days to come. Maybe home not place. Maybe home is person who see you true. They sat together watching the stars wheel overhead while below. Their pursuers made camp for the night, unaware that their quarry sat above them like eagles on a cliff. Clara felt the warmth of Taza beside her, solid and real in a world that had become uncertain. She thought of the sign that had marked her for death, Indian land, and realized with a start that she no longer felt like a trespasser. The land itself had accepted her, brought her to this man who saw her not as white or woman or victim, but simply as Clara, and in return, she saw him not as savage or enemy, but as Taza, protector, fellow survivor, and perhaps something more that she wasn't ready to name yet. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, harder climbs, the constant threat of discovery. But tonight, under the vast tapestry of stars, two souls were writing a different story than the one hatred had tried to impose on them. They were choosing their own land, their own belonging, their own possibility of home. The frontier town of Bitter Creek squatted on the edge of civilization like a festering wound, all dust and desperation under the harsh afternoon sun. Taza and Clara approached cautiously. Having descended from the mountains out of necessity, their supplies were dangerously low, and winter was beginning to show its teeth in the high country. Clara wore a bonnet they'd traded for with a traveling Mexican family, her face partially hidden, while Taza had reluctantly donned a worn serape that helped obscure his Comanche features. "Stay close," Taza murmured as they entered the town's main street. "Speak little." The town was busier than either had expected. Miners, cowboys, merchants, and drifters mingled in the dusty thoroughfare, creating enough chaos that two more travelers might pass unnoticed. Clara kept her eyes down, acutely aware of how her sun-darkened skin and the native dress beneath her borrowed shawl might appear to observant eyes. They made their way to the general store, a ramshackle building that leaned precariously to one side. The proprietor, a thin man with suspicious eyes, watched them enter with the wariness of someone who'd seen too much trouble walk through his door. "Need supplies," Taza said gruffly, affecting the broken English of a Mexican laborer. He placed a small leather pouch on the counter. Inside were silver coins taken from an abandoned cavalry camp they'd found in the mountains. The proprietor's eyes narrowed, but silver was silver. He gestured toward his goods with grudging acceptance, as Taza selected dried beans, salt pork, and ammunition. Clara drifted toward a corner where bolts of fabric lay dusty and forgotten. Her fingers traced the patterns, remembering her mother's quilting, when a voice made her freeze. Well, what have we here?" 3 men had entered the store, reeking of whiskey and trail dust. Cowboys by their look, with the hard eyes of those who'd left conscience behind somewhere on the range. The one who'd spoken, a thick-set man with a scar across his jaw, was studying Clara with interest that made her skin crawl. "Pretty little thing, ain't she?" he continued, moving closer, though dressed mighty strange for a white woman. "Unless—" his eyes narrowed, "unless she ain't properly white at all." Clara forced herself to remain calm, keeping her face turned away. Taza had gone very still by the counter, his hand drifting toward the knife at his belt. "I asked you a question, girl," the cowboy growled, reaching for Clara's arm. "You deaf or just unfriendly?" "Please," Clara said quietly, trying to step away. "We're just passing through." But her accent, clearly Eastern and educated, only increased the man's interest. Passing through with a Mexican, or is he something else? The cowboy's companions had spread out, blocking the exit. "Boys, I think we found us something interesting. Maybe one of them Indian lovers we've been hearing about. Maybe even that girl from the Hawthorne party that supposedly died." Clara's blood ran cold. Word of her family's massacre had spread. And these men were looking for her, whether for bounty or sport. She didn't want to know. "You're mistaken," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I'm nobody. Nobody don't have them educated words," the scarred cowboy said. He yanked at her bonnet, pulling it free. Her sun-lightened hair spilled out, and he grinned triumphantly. "Look at that! White girl dressed like a squaw, traveling with a breed. What would make a decent woman do such a thing? Unless she'd turned savage herself." The word hung in the air like a curse. Other patrons in the store backed away, not wanting involvement. The proprietor disappeared into his back room. Violence was coming, as inevitable as thunder after lightning. Let her go. Taza's voice was quiet, but carried steel beneath the surface. He'd abandoned his pretense, standing straight and proud, every inch the Comanche warrior. The cowboys laughed. "Listen to that," Scar said. "The savage speaks. Tell me, Red Man, what'd you do to her? What'd you do to make a white woman forget her place?" "Nothing she didn't want," Clara said suddenly, her fear transforming into anger. "Which is more than I can say for men like you." The words were calculated to provoke, and they succeeded. Scar's face darkened with rage. "Savage's woman!" He spat. "No better than a whore." He grabbed for her again, but Taza was already moving. His fist connected with Scar's jaw with a crack that echoed through the store. The cowboy staggered back, blood streaming from his mouth as his companions reached for their guns. "No!" Clara shouted, but Taza had already drawn his knife, the blade gleaming wickedly in the dim light. For a moment, violence teetered on the edge of explosion. Then, unexpectedly, laughter came from the doorway. A new figure had entered, a grizzled mountain man with a rifle casually resting on his shoulder. "Now, boys," he drawled. "Seems to me you're making a fuss over nothing. Man wants to trade in peace. Woman wants to pick her company. Ain't no law against either, last I checked. Stay out of this, old man," one of the cowboys warned. The mountain man's eyes went cold. "Son, I've skinned bears younger and meaner than you. Put them irons away before someone gets hurt. And by someone, I mean you." There was something in his tone that suggested he'd make good on the threat. The cowboys hesitated, outnumbered now and facing 2 armed men instead of 1. Scar spat blood on the floor. "This ain't over," he told Taza. "We see you on the trail. You and your squaw both get what's coming." They left with the swagger of men trying to salvage pride, but Clara could see the promise in their eyes. They'd made enemies today, dangerous ones. The mountain man watched them go, then turned to Taza and Clara. "You two got the sense God gave a goose. You'll be gone before they sober up enough to gather friends." "Thank you," Clara said. He shrugged. "Don't like bullies. Never have." He studied them with knowing eyes. "You're the girl from the Hawthorne massacre, ain't you? Heard tell you were dead." Clara lifted her chin. "I am dead. That girl died on the prairie. I'm someone else now." The mountain man nodded slowly. "Fair enough. We all get to choose who we are out here, but choose fast and choose far. Them boys will be back with friends, and next time there won't be no talking." Taza gathered their supplies quickly, while Clara kept watch at the door. The proprietor had reappeared, eager to take their money and see them gone. As they prepared to leave, the mountain man stopped them. "Head south," he said quietly. "There's a Mexican settlement 2 days' ride. They don't ask questions if you don't cause trouble. Might be you could winter there, let the heat die down." "Why help us?" Taza asked. The old man smiled, showing gaps in his teeth. "Had me a Shoshone wife once, best woman I ever knew. Lost her to smallpox the whites brought. I know what it's like, trying to live between worlds. It's hard enough without fools making it harder." They left Bitter Creek as shadows lengthened across the desert. Supplies packed on the horse Taza had kept hidden outside town. Clara rode behind him, arms wrapped around his waist, feeling the tension in his body slowly ease as they put distance between themselves and danger. "I'm sorry," she said as they made camp in a dried riverbed miles from town. "I should have stayed hidden, should have kept quiet." Taza shook his head. "You speak truth. They would have found reason for hate anyway. Men like that, hate is all they have. The one with the scar, he knew my name. They're hunting for me specifically." The thought chilled her more than the desert night. "Why? What could it matter to anyone if I lived or died?" "You lived," Taza said simply. "That makes their story lie. They say Indians kill all whites, but Indian saved you. They say white woman with Indian must be forced, but you choose. Your life shows different truth. Dangerous truth." Clara understood then. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a contradiction to the narrative that justified all the violence, all the hatred. Her very existence challenged the simple story of civilization versus savagery that men used to excuse their cruelty. "Then I'll keep living," she said fiercely. "Out of spite, if nothing else." Taza smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "Spite, good reason. My grandmother lived to 90 winters on spite alone." They laughed together in the darkness, finding humor despite the danger that stalked them. As they prepared to sleep, taking turns on watch, Clara found herself thinking about the mountain man's words about choosing who you are. She'd been Clara Hawthorne, dutiful daughter heading west to a new life. That girl had died with her family, left behind with a cruel sign around her neck. But who was she now? Neither fully white nor accepted by Indians, existing in the space between worlds with a man who understood that liminal place all too well. Perhaps that was answer enough. She was whoever she chose to be, defined not by others' hatred but by her own choices. "Taza," she called softly during his watch. "The place you mentioned, the sacred place your grandfather showed you, is it real?" "Real as stars," he confirmed. "Hidden valley where hot springs steam in winter, where game is plenty and few men know the way." "Then that's where we should go," Clara said, "not to hide, but to live, to build something new." She couldn't see his face in the darkness, but she heard the hope in his voice when he replied, "Yes, we go there, make new story." As Clara drifted off to sleep, she thought about stories, the ones others told about them, full of lies and hate, and the one they were writing themselves with each choice, each mile traveled, each moment of trust built between them. Let the cowboys and soldiers tell their tales. She and Taza would live their own truth, written not in blood and boundaries, but in the simple act of two people choosing to see each other as human. The desert stars wheeled overhead, indifferent witnesses to the small human dramas below. But Clara felt their blessing nonetheless. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, but also new possibilities. She was no longer bound by the sign others had hung on her. She was free to choose her own land, her own life, her own love. The pine forest wrapped around them like a living cathedral, ancient trees stretching toward heaven while their roots gripped earth that had never known a plow. Taza led Clara deeper into this primordial world, following paths visible only to eyes trained by generations of knowledge. They'd been climbing for 3 days since leaving the desert behind, and with each step higher, Clara felt the weight of the outside world falling away. "Close now," Taza said, pausing beside a stream that tumbled over moss-covered stones. "Valley my grandfather called where the earth breathes. You see why soon." Clara knelt to drink from the crystal water, tasting minerals and snowmelt, the pure essence of the mountains. Her hands, once soft from a life of genteel pursuits, were now brown and calloused, marked by their journey. She found she preferred them this way, hands that showed survival, strength, capability. They crested a final ridge as the sun reached its zenith, and Clara gasped at what lay before them. The valley spread like a hidden jewel, perhaps 2 miles long and half as wide, surrounded by protective peaks. Steam rose from several points where hot springs bubbled from the earth, creating an ethereal mist that drifted through groves of aspen and pine. A small lake reflected the sky like a mirror, and meadows of late wildflowers painted splashes of color against the green. "Oh, Taza," Clara breathed. "It's paradise. My people come here for healing," he explained, leading her down a game trail into the valley. "Body healing in hot springs, spirit healing in silence, place of peace, even between enemies. No blood spilled here. Ever." They made camp near one of the hot springs, where someone long ago had arranged stones to create natural pools. The remains of other camps were visible, fire circles, carved markers on trees, signs of temporary habitation stretching back generations. But now they were alone, possibly the only humans within 50 miles. That evening, as they soaked aching muscles in the mineral-rich water, Clara felt something within her finally unclenching. The constant vigilance of the past weeks, the fear of pursuit, The weight of loss all seemed to dissolve in the healing warmth. Across the pool, Taza watched her with eyes that held a question he hadn't yet voiced. "What is it?" she asked softly. "You different here," he said, "like flower opening to sun. This who you really are, when fear gone." Clara considered this. "I never knew who I really was before. I was Papa's daughter, James's sister, a proper young lady preparing for marriage to some suitable man. But none of that was chosen. It was just given to me. This." She gestured to the valley, to him, to their strange shared life. "This I chose." They were quiet for a moment, listening to the bubble of the springs and the evening songs of birds. Then Taza spoke again, his voice careful. "Clara, I must say something. Think something for days now." He paused, choosing his words. "You free to go whenever want, not bound to me. If you want, return to your people. I take you safe place, give you horse and supplies. You not owe me anything." Clara's heart constricted at the thought. "Is that what you want? For me to leave?" "No," he said quickly, then softer. "No, but must be your choice, real choice. Not because scared or nowhere else go, because—" He struggled with words that seemed too large for any language. "Because heart chooses—" Clara moved through the water toward him, seeing in his face the same vulnerability she felt. This proud warrior, who had survived loss that would break most men, was offering her freedom even as his eyes begged her to stay. She reached out, touching the scar on his chest. Not the old one from the cavalry saber, but a newer one over his heart that had nothing to do with physical wounds. "My heart chose weeks ago," she said, "when you cut my bonds and gave me water. When you shared your wife's clothes and your grandfather's paths. When you showed me that Indians and whites were just words people used to pretend we're different." She took a breath, finding courage. "I love you, Taza, not because I have nowhere else to go, but because I have nowhere else I want to be." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise over the mountains. He pulled her close, and their lips met in their first kiss, tentative at first, then deeper, full of promise and passion too long denied. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "I love you, Clara," he said, the English words awkward but heartfelt. "Tried not to, told myself impossible. White woman, Comanche man, world says cannot be. But heart not listen to world." They left the pool and returned to their camp, where the fire had burned low. But instead of banking it for the night, Taza fed it new wood until it blazed bright. From his pack, he withdrew items Clara had seen him gather over their journey: sage, sweetgrass, tobacco, and a small pouch of pollen. "If you wish," he said formally, "we make ceremony. Not Christian marriage, not full Comanche ritual. Cannot do without my people. But promise ceremony. Earth and sky as witness. Binding as any word said in church." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, oh, yes." What followed was simple, yet profound. Taza created a sacred circle with the sage smoke, invoking the four directions and the spirits of the place. He spoke in Comanche, then English, telling the story of their meeting, their journey, their choice to join their paths. Clara repeated words he taught her, promises of fidelity and partnership, of facing whatever came as one rather than two. They exchanged gifts. Clara gave him a lock of her hair braided with beads they'd traded for, while Taza placed around her neck a necklace of silver and turquoise that had been his mother's. As the moon rose full and bright above the valley, they sealed their union with shared breath, shared smoke, shared intentions spoken to the watching stars. That night, by the fire's warm glow, they became one in body as they had in spirit. There was tenderness in their joining, and passion too, the culmination of attraction that had built through danger and trust, through small kindnesses and large sacrifices. Clara discovered in Taza's arms a completeness she'd never imagined, while he found in her embrace a healing he'd thought forever lost. Afterward, they lay entwined under a blanket of stars, skin against skin, hearts beating in rhythm. Clara traced the tattoos on Taza's chest, understanding now that each line was a story, a history written in flesh. Tell me what they mean. She requested, so he did, pointing to each design. This for my first hunt. This when I became warrior. This. He touched a pattern near his heart. When son was born. And this. He indicated a new design he'd been working on with pine soot and a sharp stick. This for you, for new beginning. What does it say? Says where two paths become one. Old symbol, but I add new elements. See, this line is river of tears. Your sorrow and mine. But here, rivers join, become stronger, flow toward sunrise. Clara kissed the new tattoo gently. It's perfect. Though I should warn you, I can't cook as well as a proper Comanche wife, and I know nothing of tanning hides or making pemmican. Taza chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest. I teach you. You teach me too. How to read your books, maybe. How to understand white man's thinking when we must. You think we'll have to deal with the outside world again? Someday, he admitted. Cannot hide forever, but for now, we have this. Have time to grow strong together. When ready, maybe we find others like us, mixed families, people between worlds, make new kind of life. They talked until dawn, making plans both practical and fanciful. Where to build a proper shelter before winter. How to preserve enough meat and gather enough roots to sustain them. The possibility of children someday, who would carry both their bloods and perhaps help bridge the divide between peoples. They'll face hardship, Clara said soberly. Neither side will fully accept them. Then we make them strong. Taza replied, teach them they are double blessed, not half anything. Teach them love stronger than hate. As the sun rose over their hidden valley, painting the steam from the hot springs in shades of gold and rose, Clara felt a peace she'd never known. She'd been reborn in this place, not as the frightened girl left to die with a sign of hatred around her neck, but as a woman who'd chosen her own path. No regrets? Taza asked, studying her face in the morning light. Only one, Clara said, then smiled at his concerned look. I regret we didn't find each other sooner. Think of all the time we had wasted being told we were enemies. No waste, Taza corrected gently. Pain made us who we are, led us to this moment. Without sorrow, would not know joy. Without loss, would not value what we found. Clara nodded, understanding the wisdom in his words. They rose to greet their first full day as husband and wife in all but law's recognition. Partners in this vast wilderness that cared nothing for the artificial boundaries humans drew. The valley stretched before them full of possibility, their own private world where love had conquered hate, where two wounded souls had found wholeness in each other. As they worked side by side to improve their camp, Clara found herself humming one of her mother's favorite songs. Taza listened with pleasure, learning the melody. Soon their voices joined together, his deep tones and her clear notes creating harmony that echoed off the valley walls. It was their own music, neither wholly white nor Indian, but something new and beautiful. The earth breathed around them in steam and mist, the ancient rhythms of the land continuing as they had for millennia. But now those rhythms had new accompaniment, the sound of laughter, of shared work, of love speaking its universal language in a hidden valley where two paths had indeed become one. The peace of their valley shattered like ice under a hammer on a crisp autumn morning. Clara was gathering the last of the wild onions while Taza checked their trap lines when the sound of horses echoed off the canyon walls. Many horses, moving with the disciplined rhythm of military precision. They'd been found. Taza appeared at her side as if materialized from air, his face grave. Cavalry, 20, maybe more, coming up the South Trail. Clara's heart sank. They'd had 2 months of paradise, 2 months of building their life together in the hidden valley. Now the outside world had come to reclaim them with iron shoes and steel authority. We run, she asked, already knowing the answer. Winter was closing in, and there were few places left to hide. Their supplies were here, their shelter, their life. No more running, Taza said quietly. We faced them, together. They returned to their camp to find it already surrounded. Blue uniforms stood out stark against the natural colors of the forest. At their head sat a major with graying whiskers and tired eyes, flanked by a younger lieutenant who looked eager for glory. But it was the 3 civilians with them that made Clara's blood run cold. She recognized 2 from Bitter Creek, the scarred cowboy and one of his companions. The third wore the black coat of a bounty hunter, his pale eyes taking in everything with professional interest. "Miss Hawthorne," the major said, touching his hat brim with mock courtesy. "Or should I say, Mrs. Hawthorne? Your father's friends in Ohio have been quite concerned about you, offered a substantial reward for your safe return." "I'm not going back," Clara stated firmly. Moving closer to Taza, "I'm where I choose to be." The lieutenant sneered. "With a savage? Miss, you clearly aren't thinking straight. What this animal has done to you, what he's done," Clara interrupted, her voice rising, "is save my life when my own kind left me to die. What he's done is show me more kindness and humanity than any of you ever have." The scarred cowboy spat tobacco juice. "Told you she'd gone native. Major, been corrupted. Probably don't even realize what's been done to her." "I realize perfectly," Clara said. "I realize you're the same men who murdered my family and left me with that sign. Did you think I'd forget your faces, your voices laughing as you rode away?" The major's eyes sharpened, glancing at the civilians. "These men are deputized scouts. Miss Hawthorne, whatever you think you remember." "I remember everything." Clara cut him off. She pulled from her dress a small leather pouch and upended it. Out fell the brass buttons from a cavalry uniform, tarnished and blood-stained. "These were on the ground where my family died. Military buttons. Major, want to explain how bushwhackers got cavalry uniforms?" Uncomfortable silence fell over the assembled soldiers. Some shifted in their saddles, avoiding their commander's gaze. The truth hung in the air like smoke. The massacre hadn't been random violence, but something orchestrated. Something connected to the very men who now came as supposed rescuers. Taza spoke for the first time, his English clear and deliberate. "You come to Sacred Valley with guns and lies, this place of peace for all peoples. Leave now. No blood spilled." The bounty hunter laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "The savage gives orders. Major, I've got paper here says the girl's worth $500 returned to Ohio. The Indian's worth $200 to the reservation authorities, or $50 for his scalp. That's good money just sitting there. You're not taking either of us." Clara said she and Taza had discussed this possibility, planned for it. "I'll die first. And if you think you can take him easily, you're bigger fools than you look." The major seemed to wrestle with himself, duty warring with what might have been conscience. "Miss Hawthorne, please be reasonable. You're clearly not yourself. This Indian has influenced you. His name is Taza," Clara said firmly. "And he's my husband by every law that matters. We spoke vows before heaven and earth. We've made a life here. I carry his child." The last words fell like thunder. She placed a protective hand over her still flat stomach, where new life had indeed taken root. They'd only been certain for a week, but the truth of it rang across the clearing. Several soldiers crossed themselves. Others muttered uneasily. Miscegenation was one thing in theory, another when faced with a pregnant white woman standing proud beside her Comanche husband. "Abomination," the lieutenant hissed, reaching for his sidearm. "Major, we can't allow—" He never finished the sentence. An arrow sprouted from the ground at his horse's feet, causing the animal to rear. More arrows followed, and suddenly the clearing filled with Comanche warriors emerging from concealment. Not just any band. Taza recognized his cousin Red Sky among them, along with others from his scattered clan. "Thought you might need help? Cousin," Red Sky called in Comanche. "Saw the blue coats coming." "This woman, she is truly your wife?" "She is blood of my blood, breath of my breath." Taza replied formally. "She carries the future of our people." The warriors nodded acceptance. What might have been impossible before, a white woman fully accepted into the band, became possible because of the child. New life trumped old prejudices, at least among these progressive survivors who'd learned adaptation meant survival. The major found himself vastly outnumbered, caught between the high valley walls with no room to maneuver. His men fingered their weapons nervously, but discipline held. For now, this doesn't have to end in bloodshed. Clara called out, "Major, you're a soldier, not a murderer. Look at your men. How many are willing to die for a bounty? How many want to explain to their God why they slaughtered people in a sacred valley?" She could see the doubt spreading through the ranks. Young soldiers who joined to fight a clear enemy now faced a pregnant woman and her husband, surrounded by warriors who hadn't attacked despite having every advantage. The scarred cowboy, however, had no such qualms. $500, he snarled, drawing his pistol. I didn't track her this far to... Taza's knife flew true, knocking the gun from his hand. Blood welled from the cut, and the cowboy cursed, clutching his injured fingers. "Next one goes in your throat," Taza said calmly. The major made his decision. "Stand down, all of you." He looked old suddenly, worn by too many compromises. "Lieutenant, these men are right. This is sacred ground to the Comanche. We're trespassing." "But, sir, our orders were to find Miss Hawthorne and confirm her safety. She appears safe, if unconventional in her choices." The major met Clara's eyes. "I'll report you died in the mountains. Miss Hawthorne, tragic end to a tragic story. Nobody recovered." "But the bounty," the scarred cowboy protested, "was offered by people who profited from her family's death," the major said coldly. "Oh, yes, I've done some investigating of my own. Land speculators who needed the Hawthorne claim. Men who pay to have problems disappear, then act concerned when loose ends remain." Clara felt Taza's hand find hers, squeezing gently. The truth, or part of it, finally in the open. Her family had died for land, for money, for the endless hunger that drove the frontier ever westward. "You'll leave us alone?" she asked. The major nodded. "The woman I was sent to find doesn't exist anymore. I see only a Comanche family that wants to be left in peace. The army has bigger concerns than domestic matters." He turned his horse, and after a moment's hesitation, his men followed. The bounty hunter and cowboys had no choice but to retreat as well, outnumbered and now unsupported. As they filed back down the trail, the scarred cowboy looked back with venomous eyes. "This ain't over, savage lover," he called. Not by half, but his threats felt empty as the sound of hoofbeats faded into distance. The Comanche warriors remained until the soldiers were well gone. Then Red Sky approached Taza and Clara. "You bring interesting times." "Cousin," he said with a wry smile. He studied Clara with frank curiosity. "The child. It will be raised Comanche." "Raised as both," Clara said, finding strength in speaking their truth. "Knowing both worlds, belonging fully to neither, but making a new way." Red Sky considered this, then nodded. "Perhaps that is what we need. The old ways die no matter how hard we fight. Maybe the new way comes through joining, not separating." He clasped Taza's arm. "We winter in the Canyonlands to the south. You would be welcome, both of you." It was an enormous offer. Acceptance back into the band. Protection, community. Taza looked at Clara, question in his eyes. "After the baby comes," she decided, "we'll visit, but this valley is our home now, where our story began." The warriors left with promises to return in spring, to see the child that might represent a different future. As quiet returned to the valley, Clara and Taza stood together, processing what had just occurred. "They'll be back," Taza said. "The scarred one, others like him. Hatred does not give up easy." "Then we'll be ready." Clara replied, "We'll teach others what we've learned, that love is stronger than their hate, that new life finds a way even in the hardest ground." She placed his hand on her stomach where their child grew, neither white nor Comanche, but something new, something hopeful. Around them, the sacred valley steamed and breathed, protecting its own as it had for countless generations. The outside world had come calling and been turned away, but Clara knew this was only the beginning. Winter had transformed their valley into a crystalline paradise. Snow blanketing the meadows, while steam from the hot springs created phantoms in the frigid air. Clara, now heavy with child, moved carefully along the packed snowpath between their reinforced shelter and the warming pools. The baby would come soon. She could feel it in the way her body had shifted, preparing for the miracle of birth. Taza had become even more protective as her time approached, rarely leaving her side except to check their trap lines and hunt. But this morning brought unexpected danger in the form of howling winds and a blizzard that struck with the fury of a wounded beast. He'd gone to secure their horse in the sheltered grove, promising to return quickly. That's when Clara heard them, voices carrying on the wind, harsh and unmistakable. The scarred cowboy had made good on his threat, choosing the cover of the storm to return. Through the swirling snow, she could make out 5 figures approaching their shelter, moving with the careful determination of men who'd waited months for revenge. Clara's heart raced as she reached for the rifle Taza had taught her to use. Her swollen belly made movement awkward, but her hands were steady as she checked the load. Through a gap in the hide covering their doorway, she watched them approach. "Smoke's coming from that dugout," she heard one say. "The breed must be holed up with his squaw. Remember, we want her alive." The scarred cowboy, Thompson, she'd learned his name was, replied, "Worth more that way, the savage, though, well, accidents happen in storms." Clara knew she had moments to act, moving as quietly as her condition allowed. She slipped out the back of their shelter, using the maze of hot spring mist and snow to mask her movement. She needed to warn Taza, to even the odds before violence erupted. She found him in the grove, his back to her as he secured their supplies. When she called his name softly, he spun with the fluid grace that never left him, instantly reading the danger in her face. "How many?" "5. Thompson leads them. They're at the shelter." His face hardened to stone. "Stay here, hidden." "No," Clara said firmly. "We do this together, or not at all." For a moment, she thought he'd argue. Then he nodded, recognizing the steel in her that matched his own. They moved back through the storm, 2 shadows in the white fury, until they could see the intruders. 3 had entered their shelter, while 2 stood guard outside. Taza notched an arrow, the string singing as he drew it back. His shot took the first guard in the shoulder, spinning him into the snow with a cry that was swallowed by the wind. Clara's rifle spoke next, the crack sharp in the mountain air, sending the second guard diving for cover. "It's a trap!" someone shouted from inside the shelter, but Thompson's voice rose above the panic. "It's just the 2 of them! Rush them!" What followed was chaos painted in snow and shadow. Men poured from the shelter, guns blazing wildly in the storm. Taza moved like a ghost, using the terrain he knew intimately, while Clara found cover behind a boulder, her rifle speaking with deadly accuracy despite her trembling hands. But it was the pain that struck her first, sharp and undeniable, radiating from her core. The baby, stressed by fear and exertion, had decided this moment to begin its journey into the world. Clara gasped, doubling over as a contraction seized her. "Clara!" Taza was beside her instantly, his body shielding hers. Blood ran from a graze on his arm, but his focus was entirely on her. "The baby!" she managed through gritted teeth. "It's coming!" Thompson's laugh cut through the storm. Well, looks like we arrived just in time for the blessed event." He emerged from the swirling snow, gun trained on them. "Drop the weapon, savage, unless you want to watch her die." Taza slowly set aside his bow, his eyes never leaving Thompson's. Around them, the surviving attackers formed a loose circle, wounded but still dangerous. "You know what she's worth in certain circles?" Thompson continued, approaching carefully. "A white woman who's born a savage's child. There's men who pay good money for such curiosities. Course, we'll have to get rid of the mongrel brat, but—" He never finished the sentence. Clara, driven by maternal fury that transcended pain, had kept her small pistol hidden in her dress. Her shot took Thompson in the chest, sending him staggering backward into the snow. "You won't touch my child," she snarled, then cried out as another contraction hit. The remaining attackers hesitated. leaderless and facing a wounded but still dangerous Comanche warrior, and a woman who'd just proved she'd killed to protect her unborn child. In that moment of uncertainty, new shapes materialized from the storm. Red Sky and his warriors, drawn by the gunfire. The battle turned instantly. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered, the attackers threw down their weapons. Thompson, clutching his wound, spat blood into the snow. Should have killed you proper. First time, he wheezed, glaring at Clara. Yes, she agreed quietly. You should have, but you left me alive to send a message. Well, here's my message back. But there was no more time for words. The baby was coming now, impatient for life despite the violence surrounding its arrival. Comanche women appeared as if from nowhere. Red Sky had brought his band's families, and they took charge with experienced hands. Taza carried Clara to their shelter while the women prepared. Outside, Red Sky's warriors dealt with the surviving attackers, their justice swift and final. The storm raged on, but inside the shelter, warmed by fire and filled with the ancient rhythm of birth, a different kind of intensity reigned. Clara labored through the day and into the night, Taza never leaving her side. He held her hand through the pain, whispered strength in both languages, was her anchor in the storm of bringing forth life. The Comanche women nodded approval. Here was a man who understood that birth was its own battlefield, requiring its own kind of courage. As dawn broke clear and cold, the storm finally spent. A new cry split the air. Clara collapsed back, exhausted but triumphant, as the midwife placed a squalling bundle in her arms. A son, the woman announced in accented English. Strong, loud, fighter like his parents. Clara looked down at the tiny face, seeing Taza's sharp features softened by her own ancestry. Skin a beautiful blend of both their tones. The baby's eyes, when they opened, were gray-blue like a storm sky. He's perfect, she whispered, then looked up at Taza. What should we name him? Taza touched his son's head gently, wonder written across his usually stoic features. Samuel, he said finally. Your father's name, and Dakota, friend to everyone. Samuel Dakota, bridge between worlds. Red Sky entered the shelter, having overseen the aftermath outside. His expression was grave, but not unkind. The attackers are dealt with, he reported. But this will not be the end. More will come, seeking the woman who killed Thompson, the child who shouldn't exist. He paused, studying the small family. You cannot stay here alone anymore. It's too dangerous. Clara knew he was right. Their hidden valley, their private paradise, had been found and bloodied. But as she looked at her son, then at her husband, she felt not despair, but determination. Then we changed the story. She said, we don't hide anymore. We go out, find others like us, mixed families, people between worlds. We show them it's possible. We make it so common that we're no longer curiosities or abominations. Just people. The reservation authorities, Red Sky began, will have to deal with us. Clara finished. All of us. A Comanche man legally married to a white woman under tribal law. A child who belongs to both worlds. Let them try to separate us, and we'll make such noise that Washington itself will hear. Taza smiled at his wife's fierce declaration. You would do this? Leave safety? Face their hatred? I'd face hell itself for our son's future. Clara replied, besides, we've proven something here. Love is stronger than their hate. We just need to keep proving it until they get tired of fighting us. Red Sky shook his head, but he was smiling. You chose a warrior for a wife, cousin. Maybe that's what we need, warriors who fight with laws and words instead of arrows. Over the following days, as Clara recovered and Samuel thrived on his mother's milk and his father's lullabies, plans were made. They would leave the valley in spring, join Red Sky's band officially. From there, they would begin the long work of carving out space for families like theirs in a world that insisted on clean categories. The night before their departure, Clara stood at the entrance of their shelter, Samuel sleeping peacefully in the cradle Taza had carved. The valley spread before her in moonlight. still beautiful despite the violence it had witnessed. Taza joined her, wrapping a blanket around them both. "Regrets?" he asked softly. "Never," Clara replied. "This place gave us each other, gave us our son. Now we take what we learned here out into the world. It will be hard. Yes, but look what we've already survived. A sign meant to kill me brought me to you. Hatred meant to divide us made us stronger. They keep trying to write our ending, but we keep choosing a different story." Samuel stirred in his sleep, making small sounds of contentment. His parents looked down at him, their miracle, their hope, their proof that love could bloom even in the harshest ground. Tomorrow they would leave their valley, face the judgment of two worlds that would prefer they didn't exist. But tonight, they were simply a family, whole and complete, writing their own story in defiance of everyone who said it couldn't be written. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient witnesses to the small human dramas below, and in a shelter warmed by love and new life, three hearts beat as one, ready for whatever chapter came next in their unlikely but unstoppable tale. Spring painted the world in hope as Clara and Taza descended from their mountain sanctuary for the last time. Samuel, now 3 months old, rode secure against his mother's chest in a traditional cradleboard decorated with both Comanche patterns and small silver crosses, a gift from Maria, a Mexican woman they'd met who ran a trading post with her Apache husband. Their story, Clara was learning, was not as unique as she'd once believed. The new valley spread before them like a promise. It was lower than their sacred refuge, more accessible, but still remote enough to discourage casual visitors. Here, where a clear stream met fertile bottomland, they would build something unprecedented, a settlement for families like theirs, people caught between worlds who chose to make a new one. "This is it," Taza said, dismounting to help Clara down. "Good water, good soil, defensive positions if needed, escape routes if necessary. And look," he pointed to ancient petroglyphs on the canyon wall. "Old ones blessed this place, all peoples welcome." Over the following weeks, they weren't alone in their labor. Red Sky's band had split, some choosing the traditional path to the reservation, others drawn to this experiment in coexistence. Maria and her husband Jose arrived with their 5 mixed heritage children and knowledge of trading routes. A former Buffalo soldier named Elijah Washington came with his Cheyenne wife, tired of being told their marriage was illegal when love recognized no such boundaries. By midsummer, their settlement had grown to 12 families. They called it Harmony Valley, and if the name was optimistic, the reality was grounded in practical cooperation. Each family built their own dwelling but shared in the greater work: irrigation ditches, defensive positions, a communal storehouse. Clara used her education to start a school where children learned letters and numbers alongside traditional skills from various tribes. It was there, teaching beneath a brush arbor while Samuel napped in his cradleboard, that the past found her again. "Clara Hawthorne." She looked up from the alphabet she was drawing in the dirt to see a face that stopped her heart. James. Her brother James, older now, weathered by sun and hardship, but undeniably alive. "But you died," she whispered, rising on unsteady legs. "I saw the bodies, the fire. They left me for dead," James said, his voice rough with emotion. "Settlers heading to California found me, took me to Fort Worth. I've been searching for you ever since. They said you were dead too, but I never believed it, never stopped looking." The reunion was tearful, complicated by all that had changed. James stared at Taza with initial suspicion, at Samuel with confusion, at the mixed community with bewilderment. But Clara saw in his eyes the same boy who danced to their mother's piano playing, and she knew blood was stronger than prejudice. That evening, around the communal fire, James told his story. He'd been taken in by a minister's family, educated, even attended a year of college, but always, he'd searched for news of his sister. It was rumor of a white woman living with Indians, stories dismissed as fantasy by most, that had led him here. "I don't understand all this," he admitted, gesturing at the diverse gathering. "Everything I was taught says it's wrong, but—" He looked at Clara, happy and healthy, at Samuel sleeping peacefully in his father's arms. But you're alive. You're happy. That matters more than what anyone taught me. Stay, Clara urged. Learn who we really are. Make your own judgment. James remained for a month, and in that time, Clara watched her brother's worldview reshape itself. He saw Taza's gentle care for his family, his wisdom in counsel, his skill in providing. He saw the Apache woman who was their healer save a white trader's child from fever. He saw former enemies working together, children playing without knowledge of the hatred that was supposed to divide them. I've been writing to newspapers back east, he told Clara one evening, about what I've seen here. Some won't publish it, but others are interested. There's a movement growing. People who believe in equality, in justice. They need to know places like this exist. But with attention came danger. The army, pressured by local interests, sent a delegation to investigate reports of a renegade settlement. Clara stood with Taza and the other leaders as Captain Michael O'Brien, a fair-minded officer of Irish descent, surveyed their community. You've built something here, he acknowledged, but you must know it can't last. The law doesn't recognize marriages like yours. The government wants Indians on reservations, not in mixed communities. Then the law needs changing, Clara said simply. Captain, look around you. We farm, we trade, we educate our children. We threaten no one. We ask only to be left in peace to live as families. O'Brien sighed, removing his hat to run fingers through graying hair. I have orders. Mrs. He paused, unsure how to address her. Taza, Clara supplied firmly. Clara Taza, and this is my husband, recognized by his people and by God if not by your government. This is our son, an American citizen by birth who happens to have mixed heritage. Will you tear apart families? Captain, is that why you wear the uniform? The captain studied Samuel, who chose that moment to smile and reach for the bright brass buttons on his uniform. Something in O'Brien's expression softened. I'll report that I found a peaceful agricultural settlement posing no threat, he said finally. I'll request formal recognition, though I can't promise anything. But you should know, there are those who won't be satisfied with my report, who see your very existence as a threat to their vision of how things should be. He was right. Through the fall, they faced challenges. Cowboys who tried to run off their horses, officials who questioned their land claims, missionaries who came to save them from their heathen ways. But for every enemy, they found unexpected allies. Mexican traders who preferred dealing with honest mixed families over corrupt officials, former slaves who understood exclusion and offered support, even some white settlers who judged by character rather than color. Winter brought its own test when sickness struck the valley, scarlet fever that didn't care about racial boundaries. Clara worked alongside the healers, using both traditional remedies and what she remembered of her mother's nursing. They lost 2 elderly members and nearly lost several children, including Samuel, who burned with fever for 3 terrifying days. It was during his recovery, as she held her son and sang the lullabies her mother had sung mixed with Comanche sleeping songs Taza had taught her, that Clara understood fully what they'd built. Not just a settlement, but a family larger than blood. When Samuel needed medicine, they didn't have. It was Jose who rode through a blizzard to find it. When Clara collapsed from exhaustion, it was the Apache and Cheyenne women who cared for her son as their own. Spring came again, and with it, unexpected visitors. A delegation from Washington, including a senator known for his progressive views and a journalist from Harper's Weekly. James had done his work well, bringing their story to those with power to protect or destroy. The senator, Abraham Hartley, was blunt in his assessment. You've created something that challenges everything people believe about race and civilization. Half of Washington wants to shut you down. The other half wants to study you like specimens. And what do you want? Taza asked. I want to believe America can be what it claims, a place where all are created equal, but wanting and achieving are different things. He paused, watching the mixed children playing together. I can offer you limited protection, official recognition as an experimental community. It's not much, but it's a start. Clara knew they had no choice but to accept. Limited protection was better than none, and official recognition meant they existed in law, not just in fact. As the delegation prepared to leave, the journalist approached Clara. "Mrs. Taza, what would you say to those who claim you've betrayed your race?" Clara looked at her son, now toddling on sturdy legs, chasing a butterfly without knowledge of the boundaries he crossed with every step. "I'd say that love recognizes only one race, the human race. We're not betraying anything. We're fulfilling the promise that all are created equal." "And the sign?" he pressed. "The one that marked you for death?" Clara smiled, a fierce expression. "Someone tried to use hatred to define me, to make me less than human. Instead, it led me to my husband, my son, my community. They wrote Indian land to mark territory and exclude. We've made it mean something else, a place where Indian and white and Mexican and black can all claim land together, as neighbors, as friends, as family." That evening, as the sun set over Harmony Valley, Clara stood with Taza on the hill overlooking their community. Smoke rose from dozens of chimneys, the sound of laughter and life carrying on the wind. Samuel played at their feet, building towers with stones, already showing his father's patience and his mother's determination. "Think it will last?" Taza asked, his arm around her waist. "Nothing lasts forever." Clara replied pragmatically, "But ideas, love, the children we raise to see beyond hatred, those things endure. Whatever happens to this place, we've proven it's possible. Others will prove it again, in their own ways, until someday it's so common no one remembers why it was ever forbidden." Taza pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "My wise wife, still seeing far like eagle, and my beloved husband, still making poetry of truth." Below them, their neighbors prepared for the evening meal. Maria called children in Spanish while Elijah's wife sang in Cheyenne. English and Comanche and Apache mingled in the air like spices in a new recipe, creating something unprecedented. On the pole in the center of their settlement flew a flag of their own design, not replacing the American flag but accompanying it. It showed a circle of hands, all different colors, clasped in unity. Above it, the words they'd chosen as their motto, E pluribus unum, out of many. One, America's promise, made real in defiance of America's prejudices. Clara remembered the girl she'd been, bound and marked for death, left to die because she represented a threat to the simple story of us versus them. That girl had died in the desert. In her place stood a woman who'd helped build something new, something that couldn't be killed because it lived in too many hearts. The stars began to emerge, the same stars that had witnessed her rescue, her love, her transformation, under their eternal light. Harmony Valley prepared for another night of shared dreams, proving with every peaceful moment that the sign which had marked her for death had instead marked the beginning of new life, not just for her, but for all who dared to believe that love was stronger than hate, that unity was possible despite difference, that the human heart, when given the chance, would always choose connection over division. Their story was far from over. There would be more challenges, more victories, more losses. But tonight, with her family around her and her community thriving, Clara knew they'd already won the only battle that mattered, the right to define themselves, to love freely, to raise their children in hope rather than hatred. The sign had read, Indian land. Now, it was simply our land, all of them, together, writing a new chapter in the American story, one family at a time. Thank you, dear listeners, for joining me on this incredible journey through Clara and Taza's story. I'm curious, where are you listening to this tale of love conquering prejudice in the Old West? Please share in the comments below so we can connect across distances, just as our characters connected across differences. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel for more powerful stories that remind us of love's triumph over hate. What touched your heart most about Clara and Taza's journey? Share your thoughts. I'd love to hear how their story resonates with you today.